Welcome, folks. Welcome, humans, and any animal companions who might be joining us. My dogs, Blaze and Ember, are here in the room with me, but they are laying at my feet right now. We're happy to see you this afternoon. I'm going to start out this day with a little sharing inspired by a book that I'm currently reading. Who are the people in your neighborhood? Phil, you can throw that first slide up if you would, please. So when I started to look at this and titled it, Who Are the People in Your Neighborhood? It immediately brought me right back to childhood and to Sesame Street. I did a little research about Sesame Street just to see how far they took the term people. There was an episode that they actually highlighted birds. Who are the birds in your neighborhood? So there were a number of different Muppets that represented different birds. But that's about as far as they got. There is an ancient question in the Christian scriptures: who is my neighbor? It sounds like a simple question, and we usually answer it geographically. And Phil, you can come back to me if you'd like to. My neighbors are people next door, they're across the street, they're down the block. Or perhaps we answer it morally. My neighbor is the stranger. My neighbor is a person in need. My neighbor is the person who looks, believes, or votes differently than I do. For centuries, our spiritual traditions have challenged us to keep widening that circle. And in my legal circles, I'm an attorney as well, we continue to push the question, who is a person? To include chimpanzees and elephants and other more than human beings. What if our neighbors have fur, feathers, and scales? What if they live beneath the soil, inside the trees, above our rooftops, or move through our neighborhoods while we sleep? What if we drew a map of our neighborhood that included everyone who actually lives there? I've been thinking about this because of Ryan Hooling's new book, and I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but it's called The Hidden Nations of Animals: The Grand Tour of Earth's Wild Civilizations. Hooling invites us to see animal communities geographically, to recognize that other animals have territories, travel routes, gathering places, communities, and homes. And he points out something fascinating about the way we humans make maps. When humans live somewhere, we call the place populated. And if you look at recent Canadian wildfires, you would believe that human communities are the only communities affected by those fires. Earlier this week, a Reuters headline read, "Octogenarian is first killed in British Columbia wildfire." But when humans aren't there, we call it uninhabited. A forest can be filled with birds, bears, insects, deer, squirrels, and countless other beings. Animals may have been born there, raised their young, found food, built homes, lived and died there for generations. And we look at the map and call it uninhabited. Perhaps the problem is with the map. Phil, if you could throw up the next slide, please. At the University of Exeter's Penryn campus in Cornwall, England, students will arrive on the first day of classes next month on September 21st. As part of their orientation, they will be given two maps. One will tell them where to find the library, classrooms, residence halls, paths between buildings. The second, here is illustrated by Oliver Uberti in Ryan's book, will tell them who else lives there. where their babies are born, where their homes are located, their travel routes, their lunch spots. Hedgehogs, woodpeckers, snails, bumblebees, moths, wildflowers, flowers, apple trees, ancient oaks, even a newly discovered species of jumping spider. The animals and plants have always been there, but what changed was the map. And maybe even more importantly, what changed was the understanding of who belonged on the map. What would happen if we made multi-species maps of our own neighborhoods? Imagine drawing yours, your home, your neighbors' homes, the sidewalks, the church, temple, synagogue. Now add to that map the neighborhood from the perspective of everyone else who lives there. Everything changes. That maple tree that is landscaping to you may be a home to a squirrel. The hedge at the end of my driveway may be something that I need to trim, but to a rabbit, it may be a shelter. The flowers I planted because I liked their colors may be a dining room for bees or butterflies. And then there are all the pathways that don't appear on our maps, the highways of moles and groundhogs. And anyone who's ever walked a dog, like I did with Blaze and Ember this morning, knows that they carry extraordinarily detailed maps of our neighborhoods written in scent. Suddenly, an ecological question becomes a spiritual one. Whose home counts? Whose family counts? Whose community counts? And ultimately, who is my neighbor? Our religious traditions give us different languages for thinking about this. The Hebrew scriptures describe creation overflowing with life and declare the whole of it good. Jesus tells his followers, look at the birds, consider the lilies. Buddhist traditions extend loving kindness and compassion beyond the borders and boundaries of our own species to all sentient beings. Hindu and Jain traditions teach ahimsa, non-harm, as a profound spiritual discipline. Many indigenous traditions remind us that the beings with whom we share the land are not scenery or resources, they are relations. Different traditions and theologies, but I hear within them a shared invitation to look again, because maybe one of the spiritual problems that we have isn't the world has become less sacred. Maybe we've simply stopped noticing. A robin becomes background noise. A deer becomes a traffic hazard. Raccoon becomes a garbage problem. An extraordinary living being disappears beneath the labels we've given them. But multi-species mapping asks us to become curious again. Who lives here? Where do they sleep and raise their young, find water, find food? Where do they travel? And then comes the more difficult part, because once we begin mapping our neighbors, we also see the dangers of our own maps, the road that cuts across an animal's route, the windows that reflect sky that a migrating bird cannot recognize as glass, the bright lights turning night into day, the tree that disappears. Eventually, the map turns the question back toward us, what kind of neighbor am I? I was reminded of that quite literally on my own street. There in the middle of the familiar landscape I thought I knew, I discovered a white fawn last week. There was something almost otherworldly about seeing this small, pale being in a place I travel every day. What struck me afterward was this, that the fawn wasn't visiting my neighborhood. I was encountering the fawn's neighborhood too. That little deer had a map of this place before I ever thought about drawing one. Place to rest and eat, a route followed with her what looked to be a brother or a sister of normal coloring. Places that felt safe and did not. Her map crossed mine. That's actually a picture of the fawn that I saw. And for a moment, because she was so unusual and so startlingly beautiful, I paid attention. But then I wondered, how many other neighbors do I pass every day simply because they aren't white fawns? How many become invisible because they're ordinary? Maybe the white fawn was an invitation. And I should add that all of these little creatures are creatures that I've seen on my walks within the last couple of weeks. Once we begin looking, we discover our neighborhoods are far more populated than we imagined. And today, you can go ahead and throw that up there, Phil. We have remarkable tools that help us practice that attention. You can walk into your backyard with your phone and open Merlin, created by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, turn on Sound ID and listen. Suddenly, that beautiful jumble of morning song begins to acquire names. Excuse me. This voice belongs to this neighbor. Excuse me. That call belongs to another. And then there's iNaturalist. Photograph a spider, a moth, a beetle, whatever, some little life you've passed 100 times, and it can help you begin discovering who you've encountered. There are a number of scientists who are part of the iNaturalist team, and they weigh in, so you're able to learn what you're seeing, and it also helps them track nature and protect wildlife. And then the most recent one I found is this Wilder Places that can help turn your attention toward your own habitat. What is living around you and your own yards might become better places for wildlife to flourish. I love these apps, not because I think we need another reason to look at our phones. Quite the opposite. I think they teach us to put the phone down and see what was there all along. A white shape at the edge of the road becomes a fawn. An anonymous creature around us becomes some recognizable neighbor. Perhaps that's the beginning of our own multi-species map. And where is the center of that map? Maybe there isn't one. Maybe that's the spiritual revelation. We are not the center of the neighborhood. We are participants in it, neighbors within it. I invite you this week to open up one of these apps and learn the name of someone you've been living beside for years without being formally introduced. And ask, who are my neighbors? Then ask the harder question, what kind of neighbor am I to them? Because perhaps the hidden nations around us were never really hidden. Perhaps we simply weren't looking. They've been there all along, living lives that intersect with ours every single day. And perhaps our spiritual task is not to welcome animals into our worlds. It's to awaken to the much more humbling and beautiful truth that we have been living in theirs. May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I love that. I love the map idea and all of it. It makes you just start thinking differently. So thank you. At the beginning of each Sunday service, we remind ourselves of the tenets of agreement, which this community strives to uphold. Each month, we focus on one tenet, and this month it is Tenet 8, and it will be read by Compassion Consortium co-founder Victoria Moran. As Victoria reads the words aloud, we encourage everyone to take time to contemplate how the tenets can impact and influence your daily life. If you are unfamiliar with all of our tenets, please read the full list at the link that'll be in the chat.
Hi, everybody. Tenet number 8. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle.
Thank you, Victoria. Let's just take a moment and take a breath to mindfully meditate on this idea. And now here's Dina for our Interspecies spiritual practice.
As we continue to meditate on that idea, we have together, we're going to have a compassionate presence practice. This is a gentle interspecies loving kindness meditation that moves through 4 circles. First, ourselves, animals we know and love, those that are on earth here still with us, and those that are in spirit, animals we don't know and we still love, other beings, and whose lives are often unseen, and then the whole interspecies community. And so as we just heard Victoria mention, Tenet 8 speaks of offering spiritual comfort and fellowship But, before we really can carry that compassion into the world, sometimes we need a moment to receive it ourselves. And so we need to remember that we too belong and are worthy to belong within that circle of compassion. And so if you're comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes and place a hand on your heart, your lap, or wherever feels comforting. If you have an animal nearby or you see an animal outside your window or next to you or animals, you can simply notice that animal, its presence without requiring the animal's participation, or if the animal seems like they'd like to participate, you can include them. I invite you to take 3 slow breaths in and out, slow breaths. And while you're breathing deeply, feel the support beneath you, holding you up. Let your shoulders soften. There's nothing you need to accomplish in this moment. You are here. You are breathing. You belong. And you're invited to repeat after me, either aloud or within your mind, or just listen. The loving kindness phrases. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I know that I am held within the circle of compassion. And next, bring to mind an animal or animals you love, birds, fish, any animal being on earth or in spirit. Bring them to mind, into your heart, and repeat after me in your mind or aloud in your heart. May you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you know that your life is precious. And then we're going to widen the circle. Let's remember all the animals, all the beings, the tiny little insects and ladybugs and spiders and elephants. All those have lives that are hidden from us, animals on farms and laboratories, shelters and oceans and forests and cities. And we send these animals, every precious being, we send them love. And we ask in loving kindness, may you be seen. May you be protected. May you know we love you. May you know freedom, kindness, and peace. And to conclude, may every being find comfort. May every being experience love and fellowship and belonging. And what we do today in this time of Compassion Consortium and in this time of meditation, we need to remember that the love and compassion, may the love and compassion we're feeling that we touched here, that it would travel with us within our choices as we go forward in our relationships, in our energy, in our shared world. So we send out the energy of love and compassion from this place that we're each in, and let no one be left out of the circle of love. And when you're ready, open your eyes and just gently return to your attention to this gathering, remembering that we're not returning alone. We return as members of one interspecies, interfaith, and interspiritual community. We belong to this divinely inspired community, the Compassion Consortium. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. That was wonderful. It was very peaceful and helpful. So when you become a compassionist, you're joining a welcoming community of people who believe that caring for animals, one another, and our shared world is a spiritual practice. Throughout the year, you'll find opportunities to connect through our monthly Compassionist circles, special gatherings, meaningful conversations, and exciting upcoming new interest groups where we can learn from one another. If you've been looking for a place where your compassion is shared, supported, put into action, we'd love to welcome you in. You can also make a one-time donation by debit card, credit card, Zelle, or PayPal by either clicking the donation link in the chat box or code on screen. Thank you for walking this path of compassion with us. Over to you, Victoria.
Hi, everybody. Some people would say about our guest today, why did it take you so long? Because Dr. Will Tuttle has written several books, but a definite classic of our movement, The World Peace Diet. He is the real deal. He is known around the world. He's a concert pianist. He's a speaker. He's a former Zen monk. And with his wife, Madeline, who's a wonderful artist known around the world in her own right, they are fixtures of the speaking circuit, drawing thousands of people in countries around the world to hear the message of the World Peace Diet and beyond. Welcome, Dr. Will Tuttle.
Thank you, Victoria. Great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for this beautiful gathering and for being here.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have you. And something that I always like to do with people who are well known. I think a lot of people here, they know about your books, they know what you talk about. But what were you like as a little kid? What was little Will like that turned him into the man we know today?
Thank you. Yeah, I was born and raised back in the 1950s in Concord, Massachusetts, which was a fabulous place to grow up, I think. I learned to swim in Walden Pond, and my father owned the local newspaper, and that expanded. So by the time I was in high school, he had a chain of about 13 newspapers in the whole around the Concord area outside of Boston. So I was raised in this whirlwind, really, of the local news and politics. And my parents, my father was a musician. I was the oldest child. He taught me to play the piano, which I'm sitting right here at my piano in Northern California. And a little later I'll play a piece. But yeah, my father taught me to play the piano, and I loved music. From the very beginning, I wanted to be like him and play the piano. And he had his own dance band and was really good. He said, sure, no problem. You just need to practice. So I started early on practicing something every day, and I think that's a foundation because I realized when I became a Buddhist and a Zen monk that practice is really the foundation of everything, and I see veganism really as a practice, essentially. My mother was an artist, a watercolor artist, and my wife, of course, Madeline, is also a watercolor artist, and I feel like I was blessed to be raised in a very beautiful neighborhood. We never locked the door of the house, and we were in nature a lot. We were always, every summer, up in the Green Mountains of Vermont or the mountains of New Hampshire, climbing mountains and skiing and skating and really outdoors a lot. So I had an early love of nature, and my father nobody was a vegetarian or anything like that, but they had a love of nature and animals. Our neighbors would all go hunting, and my father said, that's a terrible thing. We shouldn't terrorize animals. So I think I was very blessed to have a loving family. My parents literally, in my entire life growing up, never argued. I never heard them argue about anything. It was just this sort of harmonious relationship between them. And, we had challenges of various kinds with the business, but it was very harmonious. And one thing I will mention, I did when I was about 13, I went away to a summer camp in Vermont for a few years every year, and that was where we did a lot of these similar things, kayaking and hiking on the Appalachian Trail and so forth. But I also participated in killing animals. We would catch our own chicken every year. They would teach us how to do that and cut the chicken's head off with our axe and eat the chickens. And so I had gone through at that point 13 years of the most intense indoctrination anyone can go through in terms of animals. I was eating them every day. So I really didn't like doing it, but I didn't think it was a bad thing because I knew at that point that God gave us certain animals to eat. They don't have a soul like we do. They taste good. If you don't eat them, you're definitely going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency. So I did my duty, and I was it was a kind of a coming of age. A man's got to do what a man's got to do, and now I'm in my teens, I can kill an animal, and so I saw into that, and I'm grateful for that. And we also would kill a dairy cow every year too. It was a small farm, but we always killed one of the dairy cows, which was a much more, a lot more bloody and messy. And I saw the terror and pain of that animal as we did that, and so I really feel blessed that I saw that up close. I realized in the marrow of my bones that any small little farm somewhere where the animals are all treated well, no, they're killed, and they do not want to be killed. So I'm very grateful for those early experiences, and then for the love that my parents had really for writing, for music, for art, and for education, reading books. So when I went away to college, I started reading Thoreau and Emerson, and that led me into Walt Whitman and to Zen and yoga. That was in Maine back in the 1970s, early 70s at Colby College, which led to me deciding that I wasn't going to take over my father's business, which was a big deal because I was bred to do that. I worked every job at that publishing company, from accounting and being an editor and writing and photography, and I knew the whole business. And I felt like it would be a distraction. I would end up, at 60 or 70 years old and wonder what happened to my life, because I started to realize that there's a spiritual component to life through Emerson and Thoreau and these other spiritual teachers. And so I came back from college toward the end of my time there, my senior year, and said, it's possible to attain cosmic consciousness. We don't have to just go through life here and make money and do all this. We can attain a higher level of consciousness. And my father said, this education is costing a lot of money, and how's that going to help you get ahead in the world? And but he understood somewhat. He had taught me to play the piano, but my younger brother Ed, when I talked to him about it, he said, "Yes, let's do it. Let's attain cosmic consciousness." So we decided the only really sure way to attain cosmic consciousness, because my father said, "Okay, so what are you going to do?" And so we told him, we're going to go to California. We were sure, 1975, if we could get to San Francisco, we would find cosmic consciousness. So I remember walking, and my father actually quoted Thoreau, and he said, "Every man must march to the beat of the drum that he hears." And they gave us their blessing, and we walked down the driveway with some fresh baked cookies from my mother, and we headed to California. But we decided we were going to walk the whole way with no money, and just somehow it would work, because we knew that sadhus in India walked around all the time and without money, and they did okay. So we were going to be like that. We were just going to walk and meditate. We had read this book by Ramana Maharshi, or about him, saying that we should just go deeper and deeper with the question of who am I. So we walked west and got as far as Buffalo. And then in Buffalo, it was freezing. It was October, so we decided to forget California and try to head south, because we realized it's an inner journey. It's nothing to do with the outer world. So we were just meditating every day for quite a few hours and walking about 20 miles a day. So we just ended up walking south, and it was quite an adventure. Since we didn't have money, we were totally vulnerable, and we walked south all the way down through upstate New York, into Pennsylvania, across Pennsylvania into West Virginia, and we got into the Bible Belt. And I found out what that was. I had no idea what that was, but I found out they try to save you every day, every night. And we made our way through West Virginia into eastern Kentucky, into Appalachia, which is another whole experience with people who really had nothing. And across Appalachia into Tennessee, and then south of Tennessee, we ended up, eventually we heard about this place along the way called The Farm. And the farm south of Nashville, when we got there at the end of the year, it was the largest hippie commune in the world, and they were all vegetarians. So that was it. Up until then, we would eat whatever we could get, quite honestly. We had no money. If people offered us turkey at Thanksgiving, or all right, we were glad to get it. But at the farm, we met, it was 900 people, and they were all mostly from California, which seemed very poetic. And they had about 200 children there that were vegetarian from birth. And when they said vegetarian, they meant vegan, because back then no one knew the word vegan. So but they didn't eat meat or dairy or eggs or even honey. And they had a spiritual reason, an ethical reason. They said it was mainly because I asked them about it. Why are you vegetarians? And they said it's mainly because most of the food we grow, we feed to animals while people starve. So it was about human hunger. And then also they said, do you know what the animals go through? And explained to me the terrible suffering. So they said they didn't want to contribute to that, and they're going to eat lower on the food chain. So since that day at the farm, I've never eaten meat in my life, in 1975. And I found out years later when I met Madeline, the same month and year, she also made the same choice in Switzerland. And then then we ended up in a Zen center in Alabama, and where we could just meditate every day from 6 a.m. till about 9 o'clock at night. And then eventually I did, about a year or two later, I got out to California and lived in a Tibetan Buddhist center, and then eventually, and became a vegan in 1980. I made the connection with dairy and eggs and so forth. So I've been a vegan since 1980. And then a few years later, I shaved my head and went to South Korea and lived in a Zen monastery in South Korea that had been practicing veganism for 750 years. So I realized that this vegan idea is not this new hippie idea from California. It's actually an ancient spiritual teaching that goes back hundreds of years, thousands of years. People have understood that if we're really serious about spiritual awakening and maturity and intellectual and social justice and evolution and so forth, that killing animals goes completely contrary to that, because it's not necessary, and animals are conscious like we are. Their interests are as important to them as our interests are to us. So it was really wonderful to be there and just live in that community that had been practicing veganism for so long. So I felt when I eventually decided to come back and got my PhD at Berkeley and went on to teach college for quite a few years. But I remember feeling like I had these roots of veganism that went far deeper, because I realized it's not this sort of option. You can either do it or not. I realized it's our true nature. It's just we're hijacked away from it, and it's completely contrary to how we are. So that's maybe a little bit of a too long of an answer, but that kind of shows you the whole the basic flow. Yeah.
It's a wonderful, colorful story. And I love the reminder that at the farm they call themselves vegetarian. I'm becoming more open to embracing that term, because we are vegetarian, whatever else we are.
Right.
That's part of it. So tell us a little bit about Zen Buddhism. We've had Buddhists here before. So what's Zen?
Yeah, Zen is a Japanese pronunciation of a Chinese word, Chan. And Chan is a pronunciation of a Sanskrit word, dhyana, which means meditation. So Zen means meditation. And the teachings of the Buddha went from India and went to other places around Asia, Southeast Asia, eventually went to China. And in China, it blended with the traditions that were already there, especially Taoism. So Zen is kind of a combination of Buddhism and Taoism, focusing on meditation. So it's quite different in a sense from the other forms of Buddhism in Southeast Asia, in that it really emphasizes not only meditation, but also focusing on the teachings beyond the scriptures, that the teachings are pointing at something that you can only, it's incommunicable in words, and we can only awaken to it. And the neat thing from the point of view of the vegans is that the Buddhists, my research shows that the Buddha originally really emphasized the importance of not eating meat. But as the teachings went out different places, there were various interpretations of that. But when it got to China around 400 to 500 A.D., then it grew, quite rapidly. It was very popular, and at one point, I think it was around 500, they had a big gathering of all the leaders of the Buddhist tradition in China at that time, and they decided that no meat, no egg, that's not allowed. And they never did dairy. Dairy had never happened in that part of the world, unlike India. Cows had not been introduced, and drinking the milk of another species was completely foreign to them. So in those cultures, in China, to this day, the Buddhists are basically vegan. I've been to China 3 times, and been actually usually sponsored by the Buddhist monasteries there to travel all over China, and they're vegan. It's really great to see, and it's basically the same way in Taiwan. Very similar, pretty much the same way in Vietnam and Korea and Japan, although Japan has backslid a little bit, and they call a monk that's not a very good monk a fish-eating monk. but basically in Eastern, Mahayana, it's called Mahayana Buddhism, that comes out of China. It's basically considered, like if someone is a vegan or a vegetarian, they say, oh, it's because you're a Buddhist. That's understood. It's because you're a Buddhist, you don't eat meat. And I loved it being there, because they paid for everything and they wanted us to spread the message, and I would come back to the United States. I go, well, why aren't the Christian churches paying me to travel all over to their churches and spread the vegan message? Because it's a little bit different. For them, not to kill specifically means don't kill any sentient being, not like humans, but all living beings.
That's so interesting. I remember being our first day in China back in the 90s. My daughter was like 8 years old. And we had these beautiful Chinese characters of, I am vegetarian. And even with spelled out, no meat, no eggs, no. And we'd show it at the big bazaar and and it's like, here's this big vat of rice. What's the problem? What's the problem? We were finally getting really hungry. And I found somebody who spoke English, and they said, oh, when you show them this symbol, it's interpreted as strict Buddhist, forbidden to eat animal products or anything that was ever in the pot. If there'd ever been meat in the pot, it was kind of a kosher thing of you can't eat this rice because there might have been meat in it yesterday. So it's a different way of looking at things.
And also, that would have meant to them no onion, garlic, or scallions, or leek, or any of those. Also, that when they
Right.
say Buddhist vegetarian, you can't have that. That's strictly forbidden. That's what the word pure vegetarian means. Yeah.
I love the connections because obviously the Jainism, very similar.
Right. Yeah.
Last month, our guest was a Quaker. And when you said beyond the scriptures, that in Zen, it's the experience, it's going beyond the script. That's precisely what the Quakers do when they sit
Right.
and wait for the revelation. So, oh my gosh, I love the connections. So there are Buddhists, though, who eat meat, and we run into them. So where do they come from?
I think basically it's a corruption that has crept in over the centuries. The original teachings in most all of the sutras that I've ever read that go into this, especially the Mahayana sutras, the Buddha says, well, if a piece of meat does somehow find its way into your bowl, eat around it, don't eat the meat, leave it out. And so I think also back in the day, people would never have given meat to monks. I mean, that would have been kind of an insult. That was like, no, we would never do that. But things changed, especially in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, and that area, when the French came in and the other European nations came in and started basically colonizing the cultures there. And of course, they had a lot more wealth and they ate a lot of meat, and they were the ones that had the power and the prestige and the authority. And so this whole narrative developed that among the lay people that, well, but we honor the Buddhist monks even more than them, so we should give them some meat too because they're the highest, they're even higher. And so they would save up the little bit of money they had, even though they could never afford meat for themselves, and they would buy some for the monk. And when he came around in his begging bowl, they would put some meat in it. And gradually, and I think unfortunately, the monks started to feel entitled because to be honored that way, and they started to accept it. And so this kind of just spread throughout Southeastern Asia. Buddhism pretty much died out in India and spread to Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia and many other places. But in East Asia, like I was saying, it stayed pretty much, I think, true to its roots of what we would call vegetarianism or even veganism. But in that whole area, that's the Theravadan tradition, which is also very popular in Europe and in the United States. And so I think it's just a holdover from that. And I work with a group called Dharma Voices for Animals that tries to spread the vegan message to Buddhist communities, and that's the hardest place. And I've been there too and given lectures in Bangkok and different Chiang Mai and different places. It's not a democracy. I mean, you can't question. It's like you get into trouble legally if you start questioning either the king or the monks. It's a little bit careful. You had to be careful. So I think there's just this entitlement that kind of crept in, and they have the excuse that if you think the meat wasn't killed for you, then it's okay. But of course, it wasn't. If it wasn't killed for you, but you eat it, they'll kill another animal later. And so it's sort of this technicality that they tend to use. But I was also in a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and they were also eating meat. But the good news there is, we were all vegetarians in this Tibetan center in San Francisco back in 1978 and 9 when I was there. And we would have to cut up meat for the llama because he ate meat. It was one of those situations. He was our teacher, but we had to make him some meat, even though we would never eat it. But the good news is that the head of that lineage, the Karmapa, the next Karmapa that came after the one I was there, the 16th, now the 17th Karmapa, he has decreed that no monk can ever eat meat in that whole lineage. That's a huge lineage. So it's moving in that direction. I mean, it's definitely moving away from eating animal foods. The Tibetans feel that it was so cold up there in Tibet, Arctic conditions, they really, needed to eat some. But there still was a tradition of vegetarianism, even in those conditions among the monks. But it's moving back, I think, more toward the original teachings as time goes by.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to spend time in Tibet twice, and the land is so inhospitable. To be able to grow anything is very difficult. And the community in Lhasa that had the only slaughterhouse was a small Muslim community where it's not part of the teaching that there's anything wrong with eating meat. So it's interesting to see how people live up to teachings in whatever way they are able or feel that they're able. So, Will, I want to ask you about the World Peace Diet because it really is a classic. I mean, we've got Diet for a New America, Diet for a Small Planet, Skinny Bitch, Eating Animals. There are a few books that really put this way of living on the map in the last 50 years, 60 years. And yours is one of them. So, what's it about? What inspired it? And what does it mean today?
Thank you. Yeah, I think what is unique about the World Peace Diet is it's the first book to really give the big picture of the consequences and ramifications of our routine abuse of animals for food and other products. And I think it was the research I did at UC Berkeley in so many different areas in public health, in scientific research, nutrition, anthropology, sociology, social psychology, education, and then my years as a monk kind of doing this inner research. And so I just felt like someone needed to write a book that would give this big picture, because people had written books like John Robbins and other people that it's not good for your health, it's not good for the environment, it's not good for the animals. But I could see that that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to it. What it does to us psychologically and spiritually, and the ramifications to the landscape of our consciousness. So I told Madeline, someone's going to write that book. I can't wait to read it. And then she eventually said, I think, Will, if you're going to read that book, you'll probably have to write it yourself, which I didn't want to hear. But I spent 5 years a lot of it was just in a tent, because we were on the road traveling the whole time in an RV, and I would go off in a tent in nature and sit down with a piece of paper and pencil or pen. I just wrote the whole thing longhand and then edited it, and it was published by Lantern Books in New York City, and it actually went on to become an Amazon #1 bestseller worldwide in 2010, and subsequently translated now into about, I think it's up to 19 languages. So we were then invited to travel to all these different countries where it had been translated all over the world, and it was translated by volunteers. So it kind of became a movement on its own, I think, because it spoke to that deeper dimension of human consciousness, and I think really reveals the fundamental truth that if we human beings fail to liberate animals, we will fail to liberate ourselves, essentially. That it's the foundation of human freedom, dignity, peace, kindness, awareness. This routine abuse and relentless abuse of millions of animals daily is something that just keeps us in a prison. As we imprison them, we are imprisoned. I used to teach college courses in comparative religion, and I love the fact that basically every religion on the planet has these two fundamental teachings, one of which is the golden rule: don't do to others what you wouldn't like to have done to yourself, and whatever you like for yourself, give that to others. That fundamental teaching. And then the one that goes with that is, whatever you sow, so shall you reap. And we, in our society today, we just ignore them when it comes to animals. We think, well, we buy and sell them by the pound as if they're just sacks of cement. I mean, this is hideously violent to these animals. But even though the animals cannot retaliate, our violence toward them always retaliates. It retaliates as cancer and liver disease and kidney disease and psychological problems as war and social injustice, all these different ways. So sowing the seeds of violence towards animals, we just don't make the connection. So I was just burning with this yearning, I guess you could say, to try to shine light on this fundamental connection, because I could see how everything we do to animals boomerangs right back to us. Why don't we see it? Why don't we get it? It's so obvious. And so I tried to really show in all these different ways how that happens, but to do it in a way that wouldn't blame anyone or shame anyone or criticize anyone, to show the historical unfoldment of this in our society and how religions were basically co-opted. I think Jesus and the Buddha and the great founders of religions had a fundamental teaching of compassion for animals, but it got basically submerged by the herding culture. I coined a word, herderism, that we live in a herding society, and herding animals is a practice and a mentality. And it's that mentality of might makes right, and the strong dominating the weak, and the domination of the sacred feminine dimension of life, and the exploitation and abuse of the young and the feminine. That just pervades our society, and we try to somehow grow beyond that, but we're eating it every day, so we don't make progress, really. Of course we don't. And we have more slavery and human trafficking now probably than ever, because we're doing that to animals. So to make progress, we need to treat those who are at our mercy and to whom we're not showing any mercy. And when we do that, we'll begin to make progress. And so Madeline and I really always try to do this through beauty. Like her paintings just try to show the beauty of animals and nature, and I try to create music and writing that reminds us of the beauty of this world that we're in, so we will respect it. That's the basic idea.
Well, speaking of the beauty of your music, we're going to be hearing some of that coming right up. If you want more from Dr. Tuttle, he will be joining me in one of our breakout rooms at the end. But even if you want your breakout room to be a different experience, you get more of Dr. Tuttle right now. Dina is going to tell us about it.
Well, during every Sunday service, we offer a song of compassion for your consideration and silent reflection. And today we're blessed to have you here, Will Tuttle. You'll be playing a live song for us for the animals. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, like I said, I'm right here in the living room of our home in Northern California, and I'm at the piano. And so I was thinking, I would just play a short piece of music that and show a slideshow of animals celebrating their lives in nature, and play a little piece of music. I'll just say a word about the music. Madeline and I lived for several years in a little house way out on a dirt road. It was, when we moved in, it was overrun by mice. And so when we got there, we would kind of transport them across this little stream below the house and hope they didn't come running back into our house again. And one day I had a little mouse in a jar. I was going to take her across the creek on the piano, and I just started playing a melody to this little mouse. And she inspired this music I'm going to play right now, this melody. Madeline and I call this the mouse piece. And so this is a little piece of music inspired by a mouse. And I love what Walt Whitman said in one of his poems. He said, "And even a mouse is enough to stagger sextillions of infidels." So when we look deeper into nature and the beauty of nature, as we've been doing here today already, we see such immense beauty. So I'd like to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully this will work how we like it to. And we will begin the Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks so much. Those are some of Madeline's paintings at the very end there, and appreciate your listening and sharing. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Tuttle. That was just lovely. What a lovely way to spend a Sunday afternoon, just immersed in music and visuals like that. So this is the time that we actually devote to, and it's an opportunity for folks to share prayers that they're looking for, prayer needs, good news in the chat. So Phil is going to open up the chat, and that will allow everyone to share those that are on your hearts and your minds, for whether it be a joy or a sorrow. Everything is welcome. And right away, I see a prayer request for Joanne Goodman, who just passed away. And so we ask that you carry her and all of those whose lives she touched into your hearts as we go forward from this place. Jim has asked for Melanie and her companion cat Lil Mo, who transitioned yesterday. Such a tough time. And prayers for Gail's dog Leo, and clarity for his care. That is probably one of the most challenging times in my experience, is trying to figure out how best. This is the one time we wish they could talk to us. And I see something here from Paul. Kind thought for their beloved pygmy goat Hank, who passed away yesterday. Holding him deep in our hearts as well. Hope I'm catching them all here. Safety, the feral cats that are being rescued, strength to continue to help them. Eric has asked for light to be sent to Messenger, the cat who lives with him, who's hiding beneath a cupboard during a thunderstorm right now. Please continue to read through all of the requests for prayers, concerns that folks have, and hold them close. Thank you all. We conclude this time with words we offer together each month. And Phil will put the slide up and we can read it together. This is our closing prayer and blessing. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our lives contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all. May it be so. Amen. Amin. Ashe. So mote it be. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And so it is. Thank you for joining us at the Compassion Consortium Sunday service. We do hope you'll stick around for fellowship time after a few announcements that Jen's going to provide about some upcoming events and opportunities for support.
So now, while I read a few announcements, remember that Phil has given you all the opportunity to turn on your video cameras if you'd like. And we'd love to see all your beautiful faces as we close the service and move into our fellowship time. So please feel free to stick around and join us. Please join us for our September service with Renee King-Sannen. Stay tuned to our newsletter for updates on the September service. You can register for next month at the link in the chat. Our next Compassionist Circle, Food and Faith Bringing Compassion to the Table, will be August 25th with Reverend Dina Miani-Lauman at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you are a Compassionist at any level of monthly giving, please join us for this or another upcoming Compassionist Circle. These events are especially for you to give you a small group interactive experience of fellowship, practice, and support. We look forward to seeing you next week. And don't forget about our monthly recurring gatherings for vegan meditation, activist well-being, and companion animal loss support circle. Details are always available on our website and in the monthly newsletter.